Have you ever gotten pulled into a story where just when you think you have things figured out, the ground completely shifts, where every answer just seems to lead to another question?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the feeling we're diving into today.
Right. This is the deep dive, and we're looking at some source material. One of you sent in excerpts from a romantic suspense novel.
That's right. It's When You Dare by Laurie Foster.
Hmm.
And okay, yeah, it's fiction, but these kinds of stories can be fascinating for looking at, human behavior under extreme stress.
Totally. So our mission today is to sort of peel back the layers, look past the plot itself, and try to understand what makes these characters tick. What are their motivations when things get really intense?
And what can that maybe tell us about human nature in general when faced with, well, heightened circumstances?
Okay, so let's set the scene. The excerpts drop us right into some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
We meet Dare Macintosh. He comes across as very capable, very protective.
Uh-huh.
Then there's Molly Alexander. She's a writer, and she's just been rescued from a really horrible situation.
And we also meet Dare's friend, Trace Rivers, and Trace's sister, Alani, who was actually rescued alongside Molly.
And then there are others sort of orbiting them. Chris Chapey, who's Dare's PA,
Right, seems very organized.
Molly's father, Bishop Alexander, her stepmother Kathy, and an ex-boyfriend named Adrian. So quite a few players involved.
And they're thrown together right from the start under intense pressure. I mean, the story kicks off with Dare rescuing Molly and 5 other women.
Yeah, and you immediately see the emotional impact with Trace reuniting with his sister Alani. It's powerful stuff.
But Molly's reaction is, well, it's interesting, isn't it?
It really is. You'd expect maybe hysterics, complete breakdown, but she's disoriented, sure, but also strangely focused.
Uh-huh. She asks for a hotel, wants to know the date.
March 9th, Monday. And that's when it hits her. She's been held for 9 days.
Wow.
And Dare is watching her, noticing this inner resilience despite her physical condition. She's covered in bruises, scratches.
It's that contrast and her lack of hysterics, her need to understand the situation immediately.
Why do you think that is? That need for information right away?
Well, after being completely powerless, regaining any kind of control, even just knowing the date, it becomes fundamentally important, doesn't it? It's about reorienting yourself in reality after everything's been taken away.
That makes sense. And she asks for simple things, a shower, sleep without fear,
Yeah.
things we take for granted.
Exactly. And Dare's response in those first moments is quite telling. He's very careful, removes his weapons to show he's not a threat.
Yeah, a sort of quiet competence.
And he offers help, even with the shower, which could be awkward, but it seems purely about her immediate needs, her safety.
You see his protective side instantly.
Yeah.
But you also see Molly's vulnerability, her embarrassment, her exhaustion. It really drives home what she's been through.
Absolutely. The physical and emotional toll is clear.
But then something unexpected happens in that hotel room. They end up sharing sleep. Not romantically, but just for comfort, security.
Yeah, it seems like a very primal response to trauma, doesn't it? That need for, like, co-regulation. Just being near someone who feels safe can literally calm your nervous system down.
It just
Yeah.
bypasses all the usual social norms.
Totally. It's about survival and finding safety in that moment.
So once the immediate crisis eases a bit, we start getting hints about why she was taken, who would do this.
Right. And she reveals she's an author. She writes dark, sexy, romantic suspense.
And her book's being made into a movie.
Yes.
Suddenly, the list of potential motives gets longer.
Yeah, it opens up possibilities beyond just personal enemies. Could be obsessed fans, disgruntled readers, maybe. She mentions a controversial plot twist.
Or it could still be personal, her father, maybe his associates, that ex-boyfriend Adrian.
And it's interesting, Dare immediately zeroes in on the father, based purely on Molly's descriptions.
Yeah, his gut feeling seems strong there, which is kind of chilling, the idea that family could be the source of the threat.
It definitely foreshadows some complicated dynamics. His intuition seems key.
So Molly actually offers to hire Dare. He's a bit noncommittal about the money aspect, but he takes her somewhere safe, his place.
Which is described as very secluded, high security, a real contrast to her own apartment later on.
Right. And there we meet Chris Chapey, the assistant, and Dare's dogs, Ty and Sargi.
Big dogs, protective dogs.
And Chris is initially a bit skeptical about Molly suddenly being there, isn't he?
Yeah, you get the sense Dare values his privacy, so this is unusual. But Molly's vulnerability seems to win Chris over, or at least make him pause.
And Molly herself seems surprised by how comfortable, almost luxurious Dare's home is. She feels a bit, inadequate.
It highlights their different worlds, perhaps some underlying insecurities or power dynamics creeping in, even amidst everything else.
But Dare keeps showing these small acts of care, like buying her scissors to cut the tangles out of her hair.
It's practical, but it's more than that, isn't it? It's about restoring dignity.
Yeah, exactly. Acknowledging her personal needs beyond just basic safety.
These small things build trust.
Their whole living situation is unusual.
Hmm.
They're under the same roof, but Dare is deliberately taking things slow, romantically.
Right. He seems very aware of her trauma, prioritizing her well-being over, jumping into something.
She has nightmares,
Yeah.
and she ends up seeking comfort in his room, sharing his bed, platonically.
Which again speaks to that need for safety and co-regulation we talked about.
And Chris is utterly confused by this.
Yeah, Dare's terse explanations about the sleeping arrangements add this sort of unexpected, slightly awkward humor to it all.
Meanwhile, Dare's doing his own digging,
Mm.
and he finds out something really disturbing.
Mm-hmm. What's that?
Molly's father never reported her missing.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge red flag.
Right. It immediately makes Bishop Alexander look, well, highly suspicious. It validates Dare's initial gut feeling.
Definitely suggests a seriously dysfunctional family situation, maybe even involvement.
And the danger isn't over. That red Ford truck keeps appearing. They're still being watched.
The threat is persistent.
Which leads to that terrifying incident at Walmart. Men try to grab Molly again.
Yeah, and Dare's reaction is swift and violent. He's not letting it happen.
No way. It shows how invested he is now. It's personal.
It solidifies his role as her protector, absolutely.
So they end up on a chartered flight. Quite a step up from being held captive.
A real disconnect for Molly, you'd imagine, seeing the luxury but still feeling the fear underneath.
And Dare's having his own internal battle, right? He's attracted to her, but it clashes with his professional code, or how he usually operates.
That adds another layer of tension. His feelings could cloud his judgment, potentially.
But Molly makes this really key observation. She says Dare is very, very different from the men who held her.
That's crucial. It underscores his respect, his care, contrasting with the brutality she faced.
And Dare himself draws a chilling conclusion. Whoever took her, it's likely someone she knows, someone in her circle.
Which points towards betrayal, doesn't it? A very specific kind of fear.
And all this simmering tension, this connection,
Yeah.
it leads to that kiss on the plane. Intense, almost accidental.
A definite shift. The physical connection catching up with the emotional one.
So back on solid ground, they go to Molly's apartment, and it's been completely tossed.
Ransacked. But not just vandalism.
No, her computer was left on, notes searched. They were looking for something specific, her schedule, something in her writing.
Information, definitely.
Yeah.
Which confirms the threat is calculated, not random.
And just to make things even more complicated, who shows up?
The ex-boyfriend, Adrian.
Right, with a blonde woman in tow, acting strangely, giving some weak story about her disappearance.
And Dare questions him.
And it quickly becomes clear Adrian is mostly concerned about Adrian.
Yeah, seems more self-absorbed than sinister, maybe. But it's another piece of the puzzle. And maybe a moment of clarity for Molly about him.
And amidst all this chaos, Dare and Molly, well, they connect on a deeper physical level.
Right. Their relationship moves beyond just comfort and protection into real passion, real intimacy.
But of course, the interruptions continue. Molly's sister, Natalie, arrives unexpectedly
Okay.
with her friend Jet. And Jet just happens to mention he works for the ATF law enforcement connection.
Convenient.
Very convenient. Potential allies. Or more complications. It keeps getting tangled.
Next stop. A visit to Molly's father and stepmother. And it is tense.
I can only imagine.
Bishop, the father, his first reaction seems to be about avoiding scandal. Not exactly Father of the Year material.
Worrying about appearances over his daughter's safety after what she went through, that says a lot.
And Kathy, the stepmother, is just cold, critical, even zero empathy.
It really paints a picture of a deeply fractured, maybe emotionally abusive family environment. You start to see why Dare suspected the father.
Dare doesn't hold back. He confronts Bishop, mentions names Sagan and Warwick.
Ooh, okay. Putting pressure on him.
And then Kathy does something surprising. She actually defends Bishop, but then reveals she's being followed by Bishop's PI.
What? Why?
Because Bishop suspects her of having an affair. Wow. Okay, so layers upon layers of deception and suspicion within the family itself. This is messy.
You think. It gets worse. Back at Dare's place, the dogs go crazy.
Uh-oh. Dogs always know.
They find a bomb,
Yeah.
planted at Chris's house, right there on the property.
A bomb. Okay, things just escalated dramatically.
And right then, Trace shows up.
Yeah.
He admits he was following Dare and Alani because he was worried.
Okay.
And he says he was tipped off about the bomb by one of the guys who was following them, a guy named George.
Wait, one of the surveillance guys warned him. Why?
It seems George and Kathy were involved in some kind of plot together, maybe against Bishop.
Kathy and the surveillance guy.
Okay, and Bishop was having Kathy followed because he suspected the affair, which apparently involved George. It's all interconnected.
So Kathy was plotting something, possibly with George, while Bishop was investigating her affair with potentially George.
Looks like it. In the end, the immediate bomb threat is dealt with, and George gets caught.
What a tangled web. It really shows how hidden motives and betrayals can just spiral completely out of control.
Absolutely. But through all of this, Dare and Molly's bond has just solidified, hasn't it?
Definitely. They've been through fire together, quite literally.
They plan to confront Kathy. Molly's getting back to her writing, finding her strength again.
Which is a great sign of resilience, using her work to process and heal.
And Dare is fully committed. Protective, possessive maybe, but dedicated to her. They're even talking about picking out a ring.
So a future together, built out of surviving this absolute chaos.
So, wrapping up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
what are the big takeaways here? For me, it's the sheer complexity of relationships under pressure. Hidden motives everywhere.
Yeah, and how people find unexpected strength. Trust, betrayal, resilience, it's all woven together so tightly.
It really explores how loyalty can be tested and how connections form in the strangest, most intense circumstances.
Definitely.
So, for you listening, what was the most surprising part of all this? Which character's actions or motivations really made you pause and think?
And how do these kinds of intense fictional situations maybe echo some of the complexities, maybe less dramatically, that we see in real life relationships and human behavior?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, if you have source material you think would make for a fascinating deep dive, send it our way.
Yeah, definitely.
Because digging into stories like this, even fictional ones, can uncover some really profound insights, can't it? You just have to be willing to explore those depths.